When the millionaire guests pushed away their plates, whispering in disgust because the food was cooked by a black maid, the dining hall fell into a suffocating silence. But no one expected what his young daughter would say next. Words so powerful that it left the entire table stunned and changed the lives of everyone present. If the story touched your heart, show your love, like, share, and comment your thoughts. The Grandmont estate shimmered with luxury that evening. A massive crystal chandelier lit the long oak dining table, covered in fine china, golden utensils, and steaming dishes that filled the room with heavenly aromas. It was not just a dinner. It was a gathering of some of the city's wealthiest families, invited by Edward Hollingsworth, a millionaire known for his charm, investments, and high society connections. Edward had carefully planned the evening. He wanted to impress his associates, people who lived in a world where appearances meant everything. His 9-year-old daughter, Clara Hollingsworth, sat at his right side, her curious eyes scanning the room with both innocence and quiet wisdom far beyond her years. But behind the glamour of the evening stood someone whose presence was barely acknowledged. Margaret Davis, the maid, a black woman in her late 40s, with gentle but tired eyes, strong hands worn from years of labor, and a heart filled with quiet dignity. She had been working for the Hollingsworths for only a few months, but Clara adored her. Margaret not only cooked meals but also told Clara bedtime stories about courage, resilience, and kindness. Margaret had spent the entire day cooking the dinner. Every dish was seasoned with care: roasted duck glazed with honey and orange, creamy mashed potatoes with garlic butter, fresh bread rolls, and an apple pie that Clara had helped her prepare. It wasn't just food. It was love served on plates. When the dishes were placed before the millionaire guests, however, an uncomfortable murmur rose. A tall man in a navy suit leaned toward his wife and whispered, loud enough for others to hear, "Are we really expected to eat something made by her?" His eyes flicked toward Margaret, who stood silently near the kitchen door, her back straight, her pride shielding her from the humiliation she had endured countless times in her life. Another woman adjusted her pearl necklace and pushed her plate away. "I simply cannot. Hygiene, you know. These people, their standards aren't the same as ours." A few others followed suit, moving their plates aside as if the food carried a disease. Their words sliced through the air like sharp glass, shattering the warmth that Clara had felt moments before. Edward froze, caught between two worlds. He wanted to defend Margaret, but he also feared offending his wealthy guests. His silence spoke volumes. Margaret stood still, her lips pressed tightly, her eyes fixed on the floor. But Clara noticed everything. She saw the pain in Margaret's eyes. She saw the quiet shaking of her hands as if holding back tears. To Clara, Margaret was not the maid. She was her friend. She was the one who laughed when Clara told silly jokes, who bandaged her scraped knees, who prayed softly in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening. And at that moment, Clara couldn't stay silent. With her small hands trembling, Clara pushed back her chair. The scraping sound against the marble floor drew every eye in the room. She stood up, her little voice trembling but fierce. "If you won't eat this food because Margaret made it," she said, her eyes glistening with tears, "then you don't deserve to eat at all, because Margaret cooks with more love and kindness than anyone else in this room. She's my family, and I'd rather eat her food every day than sit at a table with people who judge her for her skin." The dining room froze. Forks clinked. Breath caught. Edward stared at his daughter, his face pale with both shock and shame. Margaret gasped softly, her hand rising to her lips, unable to believe what she had just heard. Clara picked up her fork, took a large bite of the food, and smiled. "This is the best meal in the world because Margaret made it. And I'm proud of her." For a long moment, silence reigned in the hall. Then, slowly, a man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. He was one of the older guests, a gray-haired investor who had seen enough of the world to know truth when he heard it. He lifted his fork, took a bite, and nodded. "This," he said firmly, "is delicious." One by one, others followed. Some hesitated, their pride wrestling with their conscience. But Clara's words hung heavy in the air. To refuse now would be to admit they were smaller than a child's courage. And so, reluctantly, the guests began to eat. Margaret stood frozen, her hands trembling as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. For years she had endured whispers, discrimination, and silent humiliations. But that night, a little girl had given her something no one else had ever given her in that house. Dignity before the powerful. Edward rose from his seat, finally finding his voice. He walked toward Margaret, his eyes filled with regret. "Margaret," he said softly, "I'm ashamed I didn't defend you first. My daughter has taught me tonight that courage doesn't come from wealth. It comes from the heart. And from now on, in this house, you'll never be treated as less than family." The guests lowered their heads, uncomfortable but changed. And as the meal continued, the atmosphere shifted. The laughter that returned was no longer shallow. It was humbled. Later that night, Clara hugged Margaret tightly and whispered, "I'll always stand up for you." Margaret, holding back her tears, whispered back, "And I'll always stand by you, child, because love sees no color." The story of that evening spread quietly among the city's circles. Many forgot the food, the table, even the chandelier, but none forgot the voice of a little girl who reminded a room full of millionaires what true worth meant. And so, the maid who was once invisible became unforgettable. The world often measures people by skin, status, or wealth, but true value is found in love, courage, and kindness. Sometimes it takes the smallest voice to make the loudest change.